Yay! Hello and welcome to the early birds who've already arrived here. We'll be starting in just a few moments, but this is a place where if you have some questions, now's the time to post them so that I can make sure that I answer them in our time together. Are you doing okay? Does it make sense or start to make sense? Hey, Linda, nice to see you here. I want to make sure that I don't leave anybody more confused rather than less. And since it's our last day, I want to make sure I cover that. Okay, we have someone else who checked in. I'm sorry, I don't have your name because I don't have the spare phone or the spare computer to look and see it, but I welcome you. Linda is saying it totally makes sense. Yes. It has her thinking about making sure the structure is solid. And particularly if you're writing something with a strong external plot line or something like a saga that you have lots of different stories going on in the novel, trying to write that as a pantser and just write whatever you feel like whenever you feel like it on it, whatever day you're working on, that could be problematic. So the challenge with people who are writing something like a strong suspense element to it, but still want to keep it as the romance. The challenge that way is letting that suspense part take over the story instead of the romance. So I'm glad that you're all here and that you're giving this a shot. Okay, so it looked like Chanel that's thinking about the scenes and the events. And Chanel, that way, the scenes are basically how you build in between the different plot points in your story. Louise is on board with us here. Okay. Okay, we have about another minute too as people are getting. That you love my kitty. That's great because our nickname for it is terrorist. Okay, Teddy is asking, may I ask how to tuck a theme into the plotting? My work in progress has a theme, I think, and I don't have experience with that. That's a whole different issue than theme for a lot of writers doesn't come out until the end of the story. And then in the revision process, you kind of bring out some hints of it, or someone talks about it, or it's built in that foreshadowing way. But it's not something that we really have the time to go into the details on how to make that happen, because it is a different craft topic than story structure. But if you get your story structure down and you look at what the theme is, even if you wait until you're done writing and you realize, oh, all along the theme has been about forgiveness, or the theme has been about in writing the romance, the way that we're looking at it, it is that fear is oftentimes the thing that has to be revealed. So find it out and then thread it in with a comment here, with an observation there, with just kind of a light hand, and the reader will get that. Hi, Judith. I hope you are not drowning. And then we have Christina here and Paulette. And Paulette says she realizes that based on last night's class, it made her realize that the novel didn't have the buildup from the beginning to the midpoint. I needed to continue the story properly. And that's what I'm getting feedback from people who are contacting me directly, et cetera, is that it's very easy to rush these points. It's very easy to have this happen and that happen and then this happen without realizing that you never show the reader that there was a choice from the point of view character, that they had to make a decision based on that choice. The reason the choice is there is that it gives you the opportunity to reveal from that point of view character what the risk to them they're facing. So it's not just a kiss happens or a mistake happens or something. It is there. They realize what they're getting into and they have a choice to make. And if they take that step, bad things can happen. If they don't take that step, anything else is happening. So, Corinne, I don't think you need to see me if that's okay. It's just the wrong thing is pointed at this end. So yes, all you should be seeing is a 3-day challenge. I'll figure out how to fix it as we get in here. Let's see. There, now you should be able to see me. And I go away, and then I come back. Nope. I can have honey, yes. Can you come fix something? I tried to put the little square in it, but now I got me and not the little square at all. Put this.
Go here. That's fine. You're back.
But there's no little me.
Do you want a little you?
Yes, they're saying that they want a little me. There, yay. Thank you. This is why he has job security. Okay, there we go. This also means that I'm looking over here at another computer while we're trying to do this, etc. Okay, so let's look at, okay, we're starting here. This is what we've dealt with this 3 days that we've had together. We've had where the story started and that fear. A lot of people discovered they had multiple fears, so it would make it harder for the reader to understand how every step forward, which fear was being activated. The more fears you have, the more complicated it is. And let's face it, as readers, we don't want things that complicated. We read for enjoyment. We read before we go to bed at night. That's when most people read. We read for a lot of reasons. Complication is not one of them. Most of us have enough of it in our everyday lives. We don't need extra. Then we got to the midpoint of the story, which is yesterday's homework. And I've gotten through a lot of people's postings, not everybody, because there's only one of me. So I will keep working this evening on it. But what we had there is in that midpoint, some people had a tendency to just summarize, but it is not about, the point of view character has a choice in that midpoint. It is they choose to kiss the other, they choose to sleep with the other, they choose to walk away from something that they want to be with the other. All of those are choices. And in the choice, we get, as the reader, to know what the risk is. Without that, it's just this thing happened to the character, and then this thing, and then that thing, which is episodic writing. We don't get the build-up, particularly when you're writing romance. We, as readers, want that, oh, this is, yes, they're going to be facing part of their fear now, and oh, there's bad things that could happen, but we're going to be rooting for them for the good things to happen. And that's why we need to see the choice, because in that choice, we get to find out what the risk is. If they go to bed with this person, if they kiss this person, if they commit in some way to this person. And then the specific action that is creating it, not just a general, they get to know one another better, or a sense of, so now everything's okay and they, they like him a lot more or something. Those are kind of a general summation type of statement. And I pointed out for a couple people when they're doing that. So I want you to be aware of that here in the middle of the story. Now we're going to look at what happens here in this black moment ending of the story. What the black moment means is all is lost, or the feeling that all is lost. And some people call it that way. But why it matters and what it reveals to the reader. The black moment basically is a last do or die. Here's one more chance to reach the golden ring, which for a romance is to find the love with the right person, and to believe that this couple will really be able to work together and be together. Doesn't mean no guarantees of happy ever after in the sense that this other person is going to fix everything for them. No, that's not love. Love is much more, I've got somebody guarding my back, and I'm willing to give up something that matters to me for them, and they might be willing to give up something that matters to them for me. And we're in it for the long haul and during the rough patches, as well as it's not just about the wedding, it's about the being together and facing life together. So when they hit the black moment, it is when it looks like that is going to get thrown away. The fear comes up, whatever the fear is, even harder. It just when they thought, yes, we can do this, they find out or interpret something or are told something. But even if those things happen to them, it's what their choice is at that point. Do they confront their fear by actually coming out and saying what they feel for the other? Or do they, God forbid, run away in a sense, retreat emotionally, retreat because they're hurting? Now, this is, again, choice, a decision made, and a specific action that the reader sees it building up to this, that occurs about 3/4 of the way into your story. And it can involve multiple scenes or chapters, all depending on the length of your story. So this is, if you're writing a 100,000-word story, you don't want to make this done in a few paragraphs. You want to build to this, and you can have a kind of stair-stepping that can help that it's like, this can't be it. And this is where the reader gets to feel the emotion of your point of view characters and grieve with them, because in some ways this seems like a potential death of the relationship. Without this in a story, and there's a couple people that posted homework, and others and myself commented on the fact that it seemed like they resolved everything at the midpoint. Now they understand the other more, they like the other more, or they made it too kind of easy. So what we're looking for here is something that really seems like this is not going to happen. It should happen, but it's not going to happen. Now, looking at the speed bumps, again, just the same type of issues that I've been pointing out and others have been pointing out to each other in the classroom, that there's no clear choice. And it's in the choice that you see the risk. So if one character they have a choice to reveal their backstory, what they've been afraid of, that, and they've been hiding that all along, and they're afraid to reveal it because it will show them that they are not good enough, or that they are made a mistake in the past, or that the other might have a reason not to believe and go forward with them. That's what's revealed in the choice. Then a decision. Do I risk everything and admit this, or do I walk away and revert to my previous fear and why it's keeping us apart? Or no clear specific action. This is where in, what is that movie? It was, what's her diary? Honey, do you remember that one? The Diary in England.
Oh.
Nope, totally blank. Okay, I'm sure you guys will recognize the story. Bridget Jones, yes, thank you. I knew in a group that I could get that. All right, Bridget Jones' Diary, the first movie, where it seems like she goes out on Christmas Day. She races to find Mr. D'Arcy and tell him that she cares about him, that there was mistakes that have been made and she wants him. And then his new fiance drags him away so that they can announce that he's flying off to New York. And it looks like it's all over. It just looked like she wasn't in enough time. And so she returns to her apartment, and then he comes to her and her diary is open on the table. And so she's going to go get dressed a little bit nicer. He sees the diary and he leaves. And she comes back and she sees what her feelings were for him when they first met and how they were revealed in the diary, what she thought about him, which was not flattering. And so she goes running down the street in a snowstorm, trying to get to him to explain that it's not that way now. And that is, each one of those things was her choice. But it's that the reader gets to find multiple chances to root for her, that he understands her and gets together, they get together. So making these a clear, specific action. First action is she's going to go to his house. And then at his house, she pulls him into the closet to talk to him. And before he can say anything, the announcement is made that he's going off to New York, and the lady who's going with him sees herself as his fiance. So that just seems, that's a black moment. But then there's one more, this where she goes back to her apartment and he comes to her. So each of those has a choice, a decision made, and a clear, specific action taken. If at the very end she decided not to chase after him, she could have lost him right there and then. Another speed bump is something just happens to your character. And again, I pointed out to a number of people in their posting of the midpoint, it was like they just found out something about the other person, or someone did something, and so they reacted by doing something else as a result of it. And that's something just happening. And that does not have us, as a reader, come along with the character in their story. We don't root for something when we don't really know what it is. And so what that does is it creates a very passive reading experience for the reader, that they're just waiting to be told what is going to happen next because they don't see the character thinking about and doing the actions. And the third thing is forgetting you're writing a romance. Some answers that were posted were all about what the external storyline was. And that's fine if you're writing with romantic elements. But if you're writing a romance and everything had to do with they went here, then got over there, and then this happened to them, you're skipping the romance. It got buried there. Another potential speed bump is making it clear that there are risks to the character and the relationship. So somebody goes home with the other character, and thus they're changing their attitude toward him. But that's not, where are the risks there? The reader can't see the risks. Or something happened in the external plot line, but there's no risk to the relationship. It doesn't change at all. And it's not having the point of view character facing their fear about the relationship. They're facing some other issue. And the last one, forgetting that the action taken here is a direct result of what you set up based on their fears early in the story, and acting incrementally, sometimes backsliding, but the reader knows what that fear is. So every step that character takes towards love, it activates the fear. But if the fear is too murky or you have too many fears, the reader is left just wondering, well, geez, is it going to make things worse for this fear, but better for that fear? Or that's what you want to avoid here. So always think in terms of what choice is your character, point of view character facing? What decision do they make? Now, the choice is where the risks are revealed. And that can be internalized. It can be in a conversation with a friend or a family member, or even with each other. As long as the reader knows it and are not guessing it. Because we, as the writers, often know these things, and we think the reader can see them on the page, but they're not there yet. And then a specific action. So something like, and they get together. Then what does that mean? Or they like each other now. What does that mean? It's too vague. It's too ambiguous. So we're looking at a very specific action. So here's some examples. Your main character can realize they're getting too involved and choose to walk away at the black moment. Or your main character can be under an illusion about the romance and thinks that the other person is reverting or that the other person did something that triggers them. And so the main character decides to step away from the relationship, that's safest. You could have your main character encounter a version of their fear about the relationship, which you identified early in your story. This is their do or die moment to face it or not to face it. So there's been incremental opportunities throughout the story. In the midpoint, it should be clear there, because that is what's going to then lead to the reader knowing here that this is the issue that has to be addressed. Your main character will be given a last opportunity to risk for love, revealing growth and change in them as a character. That's what the reader wants to see. If you are not writing a romance, but are writing something with romantic elements, this would deal with their last opportunity to prove they're worthy of the job that they're undertaking. Make amends so that the family gets healed. Whatever it is that they're going to, that changes them as a character. And we want to see that in commercial fiction. And the other possibility for examples is that your main character, once at the midpoint of the story, if they've kissed, if they've gotten together, if they introduced one another to their families, all of these kind of social changes and that indicate the relationship has changed, if they assume that that's okay as it is, and they hesitate or is reluctant to take a real risk, to really say, I love you, or someone who is comfortable saying, I love you, really prove how they love the other. So this is what is happening at the Black moment. Now, the resolution comes after the Black moment or climax of the story. And the resolution is a key area to make sure you don't drop the ball. Because by the time we get to a resolution in real life as writers, we may be so happy to write the end that we rush things too much, or we kind of like, yeah, they kiss, that's good enough, or yeah, they're going to have a marriage, or yeah, they got the prisoner and found the killer and stopped the virus, whatever it is. But there's more to it than that. In a resolution, you need to make sure that any secondary storylines and subplots are resolved before this point. It's kind of like the early Star Trek. It used to be a game to see, did they ever go back and pick up those characters from the planet who got stuck down there? And sometimes they don't. That's a secondary storyline or a subplot that needs to get resolved. So the reader is not sitting there hitting their husband late at night saying, but they never dealt with this issue. Or what happened to this? What was the whole point of this line? And it was like, I don't know. Now, the resolution, you need to make sure you answered all outstanding questions that you raised. If you have another couple that you're using, you've addressed the issues about what's going on with that couple. If you have a couple, particularly in a romance, that are going to be the ones going on to having their own romance next, you want to bring them forward. And those are the questions that you don't want answered, because they will be answered in the next story. But you want to show change in your character compared to the beginning of the novel. This is why you often see in like Kindergarten Cop, the beginning, the character wants nothing to do with these little creatures. But by the end of the story, they're sitting reading a book to all the kindergarten students because they realized what they needed to realize over the course of the story. This is why, just like in real life, oftentimes there's a change in the clothing. Okay, this is why in weddings, you're not necessarily just going up in your whatever you muck the stall out in, but you change the clothes to show that there is a ceremony that is validating and celebrating this change in your character. The same could be said in going from a civilian to law enforcement. You know, it's not just somebody hands you a gun and a star. No, there's a series of steps that to the community show this person has changed. That's why we do it with graduation ceremonies. It all is about the clothes and about acknowledging that the change that is happening. Make sure that others are impacted by the changes, because throughout the book, we as the writer are focused on this couple, but this is oftentimes why traditionally there has been a wedding or a party or something at the end of the story, because that shows this has made change for the community, the larger context. Judith asked, can a resolution be an epilogue? Yes, it can be, particularly if there's some time difference between where the story ended and what's going to happen in that epilogue. Good question there. And in the resolution, if you are writing a series, this is where you set up the next book in your series, if you have one. If you don't have one, that's okay. But this is where a question is raised. In a mystery, oftentimes it's someone has received a call about, hey, we finally heard about, someone has some news about this other case. That's all the reader needs to want to find out what's going to happen in the next story. You don't have to beat them over the head, because we get trained to look for which couple are now, they might still be fighting like cats and dogs, but somebody makes the question of get prepared for their wedding next, or something like that, just to let them know this is who we're going to be seeing in the next or down the road. But the biggest speed bump at the end of your story is rushing the ending, where you've taken 80,000 words and now you've reduced it to a quarter of a chapter. That doesn't give the reader that sense of whatever the characters went through to find love or to find the killer, to solve the mystery, that it was worth it. Even if there were losses, even if there was pain in the process, it was worth it. It's the emotion, the feels of what it took for this heroine and that hero, or hero, heroine, heroine, to reach this point that creates that I love this book kind of ending. And that's what we want, even if there's problems, even if one of them ended up in an accident and there's going to be lots of therapy and a lot of work until they can move ahead with a wedding ceremony or even move, period. But it's still that the emotion at this point, the fears have been addressed. They might come up again at some point, but they're with each other and they can force it. They can face it together, whatever it is. Because romance is at heart a roadmap for those who believe in soulmates, that there is one other person, or if you've lost one love, that another person, there's another one that won't replace the first one, but can still love them and be loved. And that's what creates that happy ever after, or or the happy for now feeling is that sense of, yes, this is what makes the world turn around. This is what makes solid families in a lot of situations, or just good things happen. Whether this is not like reading a newspaper, then you only see one side that is like, oh, this is awful and that's awful and this other thing is awful. This is about the happy ever after, and then knowing that love is possible if two people, two silkies or two whatever, are willing to risk for it and keep going until it works. So before we get into more information that is about, what about all those other spaces? In this particular 3 days, we looked at 1, 8, and 11. But there are a lot of other things that must be happening in your story throughout it. But if you've taken the full-length course in the past, I appreciate it, and thank you very much. And if you want more information about what you can do to understand story structure, I've got some information coming. So otherwise, I want to thank all of you for being here for the 3 days, for submitting your homework. There's no homework today because we're done tonight. But I'll go back in and keep answering as many questions as I can, as many postings as I've run across. Again, I found a number that when people were tagging homework and putting it at the end of a long thread of other people, and I've already addressed the other people, and then all of a sudden there's something new that popped up, I may miss it. I'm trying not to, but I may miss it. But there's a lot more to make sure that you have a solid plot. We, again, did 1, 8, and 11. We called it 1, 2, 3. But look at all the other elements that can go into a story. And I'll explain that. But for those that need to leave, this is the chance to, unless you have a question, and post a question now so I can answer it. Any questions about what we've done so far, the meaning of the ending? Judith had that great question on the epilogue. Anna says, is the risk posed by the choice always an emotional one? Well, it all depends on what kind of story you're writing. If you're writing a romantic suspense, the risk could be the threat that's following one or the other. But if you're writing a straight romance, it is emotional, because that's what love is about, is that emotional. That's what the fears are about. All of that is emotional. So having that element of it helps make it clear you have that midpoint and you've written it down, and the emotional reasons why they still fear or what fear they're facing, then that carries that emotion. That reminds you as the writer, as you go from the middle of the story to the end of the story, got to remember to include the emotion. It's not just about these people moving around in a city or an apartment or at a dance or whatever it is. It's about what they're afraid of, what they're fearing, what they're willing to face, etc. That's all emotion. So Mary Thompson is saying that the long class is well worth it. She took this last year. The up. So we have, thanks so much for the workshop. It really made me think about my story in a more in-depth way, and it was enjoyable. And that's why many times it seems like since indie publishing burst onto the scene that people are forgetting the craft element of a story. I like Fancy Nancy. It's a question, do you have an antagonist in a romance story, or do you like love triangles? The antagonist in a romance is the other, the love interest, because they have their own agenda. They have their own fears. They have their own things that they're hesitant to bring forward and make it easy to fall in love. So even at a short story, the antagonist is the one that pushes the other person to grow and change. Now, you can have a love triangle makes it's this love or that love. So it makes it about conflict and which choices does the person want to make. That's why it's a very common trope, is this triangle. But no, I don't think everybody should be using just the triangle. And in fact, some subgenres get tired of the triangle. The reader gets tired of it. It's like it's always the triangle. So changing it up can make that difference. Okay, I have somebody asking me, do both hero and heroine conflict or fear need to come out within the first few pages, or can one be a little later after the other's fear? Yes, it can be. You don't want to put everything out there right up front. It might be initially that they just understand a little bit about their fear, but as they get closer engaged with the other person, the fear gets clearer. But it's not until the end of the story that it really comes out. So yes, there's no one rule for all the books. It is, you can do different, you give a hint of it, at least enough of a hint that the reader understands why that character is acting the way they are. Now, the future love interest point of view, they may not know the why behind it, but the reader understands it. So this is why they started making most romances with at least 2 points of view. They can misunderstand, but if the reader knows, no, you're misunderstanding them totally, then you're more engaged in the story. So I hope that helps a little bit, Rhonda. Then we have Ziona. Can the big black moment be the love interest finds out hero number one's secret via a friend? The choice hero one makes is to run away as a reaction to the event. Is that a reasonable black moment? Well, as long as that risk is bigger than what happened at the midpoint. But running away is kind of a... Now, if hero number one's secret involves that they're married or that they are abused the last wife or something like that. So it can make a very strong reason why the person who hears it wants to get out of harm's way, then that makes sense. But running away is a little bit... If that's their reaction to most things, then it might work. But it's been beaten to death as they're not facing anything. They're just waiting for the other one to fix it for them. So it's always your choice. And depending on the type of story and the situation, if the only thing that makes logical sense for the person who learns the secret and the shock that brings if running away is the only thing, but that means they haven't faced their own fears. So I think Ziona answered. The secret is that he stole money from love interest's friend. You see that? To run away from somebody without finding out, is this true? Is it really true? Because by the time you get to the black moment, the love has grown. So instead of having the love away, maybe face that and find out for themselves if this information is true before they just pick up sticks and move type of thing. So just having someone conveniently tell them a secret that comes out of the blue means that the point of view character is going to be reacting to that. And so what you've just done there in your story is you've taken away the main character or the point of view character's choice, decision, and action. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit. And again, some of these answers I can't answer and say, absolutely, this is how to write it, because I don't know the larger context here. The question is, how long will the Facebook page be available? Well, definitely for the next year. If Facebook says at some point, take this away. But this is why a lot of people ended up in the 2023 plotting classroom instead of this classroom, is that they thought they were this, that's the one they went to before, so they go back to that. So if we have this again, there'll be a change in the date, in the year. But the Facebook will still be here, as well as the being able to see the assignments and that type of stuff and learn from them. Now, that may be out of our hands if Facebook decides to cut down on how much of that they're willing to host. Anna asked, should the choice at the black moment mirror the choice at the midpoint? It can, but it doesn't have to, because it depends on what aspect of the fear that they faced at the midpoint. And now they got to really face the true fear that they didn't even realize that they were using as an excuse at the black moment. But it's going to be involved with the initial fear that happened at the beginning of the story, that's happened in some way in the midpoint of the story. And now it's really it's kind of like high school science. You go into the class and you don't know, you're going in just like in the story, but you're afraid because you don't like numbers. You want to be a writer. You don't want to be a number person unless there's story questions on the numbers. But you have to do some small quizzes along, and then you get middle of the year in the class, and you have to take that test there. And if you flub it, then you've got to make some choices about how you're going to get through the rest. You leave, whatever, or you get a study buddy or whatever it is. But then that big final, and this is a lot of teachers make it clear, this is 24% of your grade right here. So, and for some, it's more than that. So this is why that choice at the final is a bigger thing. And that's what makes people afraid of it. Okay. Now, I don't want to keep everybody here all night, so I'll go ahead and explain a little bit more about this image in front of you. because this is the image of a series of templates. And a template is at least a page long, sometimes they're 2 pages long, asking you specific questions about your story at that point in your story. So we go from the opening of the story, you get clear about the fear, but then you look at this number 2 underneath, that is the inciting incident. And the character may not know what that inciting incident means until the end of the story, but the author needs to know about it. Then you hit number 3, which is session of pros and cons. That's the choice. What am I going to do? Do I do this? Do I act on this inciting incident, or do I want to avoid it? Then template 4 is about mentors. Because in order to help you get over an initial stalemate, an initial hesitation, it is the presence of mentors that can give you reasons to move forward or not. Then you hit quarter of the way into the story, and this is the first twist point here. The last 3 days, we looked at only the one that happens in the midpoint, but there's another one here that all of a sudden, if you're writing a romance from this point forward, the couples came from different directions or different whatever, but from this point forward, that couple is forced into a proximity. It's called a crucible, whether they like it or not. This is where they get stuck at the snowed-in cabin. This is where their jobs merge, where both of them have to stay in the house, but only one will inherit it at the end of it. Then we have the 6th template, which is talking about those subplots and secondary storylines and what are the difference between them. We'll go into that. Then 7, it is preparing yourself, that the character knows that there is going to be a bigger something coming up in the midpoint of the story, whether they're ready for it or not. It's like fighting for the castle. They can see the castle, they know the castle, but this is that moment where they take stock. They again look at the choices, the decisions, moving forward. Should I move forward? Should I not move forward? And oftentimes there's an illusion here that we use in our stories that helps foreshadow what's coming up next. Then you hit the midpoint, which we talk about a little bit in these 3 days. And then between the midpoint and the black moment, you have a lot of things happening with one template. So you're trying to make sure, did your subplot come along? Did the secondary storyline come along? How has the relationship changed? There might have been losses that happened as a result of what happened in the middle of the story, all those type of things. Then we hit in 10, we hit that black moment, and you can see there's room before it and there's room after it to make sure that you have and don't rush that. And then the resolution at the end of the story. So those are the templates that we look at in the 4-week class. And what we do in this dive into the 4-week class is we give ourselves enough room to review lectures about each of those parts of the story. There's study material on it. There's lots of examples. There's quizzes, so that you can practice what you're learning. It's not just, I sent in one homework assignment and I didn't really quite understand it, but the time's over. So you don't get that time in a challenge that you do in the 4-week. Now there's literally 26 video lectures to view. And they're about 15, 20 minutes, tried to keep them short, as many times as you want at your own pace. So I'm not saying today you have to do this and the next day. No, there's a couple per week that you can dig into at your own pace. And then there are weekly question and answer sessions, just like we're doing here, where we've talked, but then there's questions raised by it or by what you're seeing. So get those review sessions here. And these story structure templates, there's also movies that you can watch and then review completed templates to see how they apply to the movie. So you're not just kind of guessing, and I'm not trying to figure out the name of a movie for you. This is that's what she means by this. And you get those templates. There's two different templates for romance writers. One is for straight romance, whether it's inspirational or sweet romance or historical. And then one, or contemporary it can be. Then there's a one if there is like romantic suspense, where there's an strong external plot that has to be dealt with. So you get to choose based on what you are working on right now, but you have these templates for down the road. So if you're writing a sweet romance now, but you want to try romantic suspense, you understand how the templates work, and there are examples for both template usage. That classroom is private, which means as we go into the Facebook and you post your homework, it's not going to show up to everybody. It's only going to show up to me and to you. So you can see other people's homework in the classroom, but you're not going to have your answers out in public. Then there's quizzes that are just built into the lecture. So and the quizzes are not me standing there slapping your hands if you didn't get the right answer. It's an opportunity to see, oh, I didn't understand that concept. Let me go back and see, here's the right answer. Let me go back to the lecture and see what I might have missed. So it is all there to help you understand story structure, to get a stronger story, and to find a process that you can repeat, because all of this material is going to be yours. It stays with you. It doesn't go away after the end of the month. So that's a real plus, because there may be some topics or some questions and answers or some aspects about the course that you don't need where you're at right now, but you might need it for that next book or the next book series. Now, the other thing that's not here in this information is that you also get an hour one-on-one discussion with me. So we can walk through your story or stories if you're writing a series. And that's a chance. It's like a brainstorming with someone who might have more experience on story structure, to be able to say, okay, think about this issue. Or if that's the case, then you have to make sure that at the end of the story, you're dealing with the same issue there. The types of questions that we come up with when we're so close to the story that we can't step back and see. But an hour with someone who has plotted a gazillion stories of all types. The only thing I don't think I've normally plot is horror stories, because they can scare me. But the rest, you have a chance. And if you don't want to talk about your story, you still have an hour to talk about questions about the career as a writer, or what about this and what about that. Paulette says that hour, besides the other money, is so worth the cost of the class. And the same with Robert. The one-on-one call is extremely valuable. You just don't get that with published authors, with professional authors. You just don't get that anymore. So Louise is coming back just for that hour thing in particular, because things can click. You know, it could be this word, it could be that phrase, it could be something that helps make sure that everything. So if you're writing a series and you've got book one done, and then all of a sudden in book two, it's like, oh, good grief, where's this going to? But we can talk about all three books so that it tracks for you as you move forward. And because you took this challenge here, you get a 20% discount on the course. So between now and the 29th, so that's 4 days from now, it allows you to save $100 on it. And this is the link that you would use to get to the detail page. And Tech Guy will be sending out that information too, so you don't have to worry about writing it down right now. And there's a coupon code that gets you into that challenge. Now, all of us face the challenge of story structure. Every writer must face it at some point or another. And romance writers have crucial elements they can't ignore. So everything from how to create those well-motivated characters, how to build your romance on decisions and actions taken. Here's the opportunity. So you can, as one good friend of mine when I was starting out said, you can spend your money or you're going to spend your time. And that is the truth, that it cuts off years of thinking that you're doing something right without knowing why it's not working. It's what I wish I had when I was starting out, because it's getting longer and longer, the number of years that you have to put in with the learning process anymore before your story is strong enough to compete with multi-published authors in the traditional publishing house or rise to the top with indie books. So you can spend 4 weeks getting it right for your current story and understand how to replicate that process. So Tech Guy will be sending out information about it. If you have questions, just contact me at marybuckhamauthor@gmail.com. And Hope's going to be in the class. That'll be fun. Hope we'll get into it and dig into it shortly. And that first Q&A session for this course will be coming up. Let me get my calendar up here. It will be, the first Q&A is the 3rd of February. Beth Ann is coming back. So that'll be wonderful. I can't wait to see what your story is going to be about, if it's going to be the current one you've been working on or you want to move ahead to another one. The time is usually on 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, unless we find out that there's a big issue about that. Tech Guy, do you work at 10 o'clock on Saturdays?
We can make it work.
He says we can make that work. So the nice thing is that by making a commitment to your career as a writer, you're also working amongst other writers that are making that commitment. The code is 3-day CHAL, C-H-A-L, 2024. So any questions anybody might have before we head out? And actually, right on the hour. I'm getting so good about trying to hit that. Usually I would promise an hour and then it would pretty soon it'd be 90 minutes. And I hate to do that to folks, but Judith, lovely to have you here. And Linda, you're absolutely right. It's nice to have flexible tech support, even if that flexibility means I have to sometimes beat him to get it. So it's been absolutely excellent. Judith has actually taken, I think, 3 live 3-day challenges, which talk about a brain drain. You can pull your story together in 3 days, but it's not easy. So that's why I created the online, so you don't have to. It's like going to a conference, but it's all about story structure, and it's all about your story and how to improve it and what you might be missing otherwise, and saving you time in the long haul to creating that strong story or strong series. So I'm glad that you were all here. I appreciate it. And we will see some of you in the upcoming 4 weeks. The nice thing too is the minute that you sign up, you get access to the lecture. So you can start as soon as Tech Guy gets you that linked in. So we don't have to wait until February to start viewing the lectures or doing some of the early quizzes. And there's also like 28 tropes. It shows you how to use fear and it's just, I'm lazy. If somebody can pull it together, that works for me. Okay, but then we've got Tech Guy going back now to get you into that classroom again. So thank you for being here. I hope you found it helpful. I also wanted to tell you that coming up in March, so March 5th through 7th, there's going to be another challenge on writing sexual tension. And if Tech Guy has your email or you're signed up to my newsletter, then you'll get information some more about that particular sexual tension happening before the sexual tension. And then the next challenge is body language, and that's in April. That's the 23rd to the 25th, 3 days. And the body language class will happen in May, if I have my calendar up here, right? So those 2 courses are coming up here too. The question is, will that link be posted in our Facebook page? Yes. Tech Guy will do that. I will tell him he's doing that and just as soon as I see him, instead of shouting around the corner. But yes, it'll be up in the group page and it will come out in an email if you've been receiving the daily assignments. He'll just email it to you. So that was Teddy who asked that. Rhonda said, I always inspire and educate. I know my mom said when I was born, I asked why. And to me, education is the number one investment you can make in your career that always will pay out. So we'll see you. The coupon and the discount will last till the 29th. So that gives you a few days to think about it or go check the piggy bank. And the payment plan, there's one that you can pay it all in one lump sum, or you can pay it monthly. So we'll try to make it as easy as possible for folks to fit in the budget. And so the monthly payment is literally about the cost of 5 cappuccinos. So, okay, everyone, thank you so much. So lovely to be here with you. Really appreciate it. And I will see some of you soon, and hopefully some of you later. So take care.